listening to Resist and Restore, a podcast from the Circle of Hope pastors where we are extending the table of our dialogue. I'm Jonny Rashid.
I'm Rachel Senseneg.
I'm Ben White.
I'm Julie Hoke.
And you know what? 6 episodes in, I think this is the 6th episode, we're really getting a hang of this. You know, I just had to tell you this. I have a new microphone that I'm using. We're really advanced level right now, so this is pretty good. And it's only because we love you.
Yeah, we definitely want you to be able to hear us well, and it makes sense with all the support that we've gotten tons of feedback from people in our church in Circle of Hope in the Philly region, but also from across the country that are really digging what we're doing. So we're investing in it, and we want you to hear us, right?
Yes, because we are very grateful for all you listeners out there.
Tell us about what we're talking back to this week, Rich.
So after our Sunday meeting online this week, which was a lot of fun, we broke out into talkback groups because talkback is a regular feature of our regular Sunday meetings. When we're able to meet in person, we open up the message time into a big conversation where anybody and everybody can jump in with questions and insights and stories. And so we made a space for that after our meeting this week. And lots of people jumped on in small groups so we could actually hear each other. And we were talking about God's provision for us in this time.
Yeah, the jump-off point was Jesus saying, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And it was so cool that people came together. I had a person in my group from Houston, Texas, actually.
Oh, nice.
A friend of one of our friends. And we were talking about what it takes to trust God in the middle of a pandemic, essentially. You know, all these resources feeling so scarce, and yet we're talking about treasure with Jesus. It seemed timely, but also a little painful. Like, it was like, oh, this is a hard thing to do in this moment.
But in my group, the more we talked, the more people had ideas about how God is providing and how we can keep providing and taking care of each other. One practical idea someone shared is that she's home baking a lot of bread these days. And she said, if anybody wants a fresh loaf of bread, give me your email or address, excuse me. And she was offering to distribute fresh bread on the doorstep, which is just like a little gift of love in the middle of this crazy time.
So that we're on Google Hangout to meet, and someone on your thing, you know, communicating via video is like, give me your address, I will give you bread.
Yep.
I will give you daily bread.
It doesn't get any more direct than
Very
that.
practical,
Yeah.
You know, what a time to be alive, to trust bread that's been put on your stoop without even seeing a human being more than the one that would be directly given to you. It's just so interesting how all of our assumptions are different now, isn't it?
The whole world has changed.
I was particularly amazed and encouraged by 2 of my immunocompromised friends who were on that call. You know, they have extra reason to be afraid in the time of coronavirus, and they were describing how instead of just worrying all the time about their own well-being, they've been surprised at the opportunities that they can give to others. Like one was saying she could pick up the phone and call people and check in on them and encourage them in faith and in love. And my other friend was able to deliver some of her sanitizer that she had stored up to an organization that really needed it. So even in their more at-risk state, they're finding ways to give, and that is sustaining them. And I think that's probably pretty key for all of us.
Typical for Circle of Hope, I would say. What do we do amidst this recession, which is likely to be a depression? What do we do with the highest unemployment claims we've ever seen? What do we do with all this trouble that we're facing, you know, when it comes to money? You know, a lot of us don't have the opportunity to even assign money meaning because we're so poor. You know, we're just, you know, in sustenance mode. And I'm glad that we have activists that care about that. I'm also comforted to know that they don't feel responsible to solve the whole problem, even if they feel convicted to do their part. Can you appreciate that difference?
I think it's an important difference to make, because it is very normal to feel responsible for that. People who care, people who are compassionate, it wears on their hearts, and they think, oh, I got to figure this all out, or just throw my hands up and hide in a hole. That kind of extremism is certainly tempting to me personally, so it needs to be tempered.
Don't you guys think that the powers get off easy when they burden their constituencies with solving all the problems that they caused? I mean, isn't that something that we that's a form of oppression itself, wouldn't you say?
Totally. And I think lots of people feel that. And I was so encouraged by, I'm so encouraged by our whole Circle of Hope right now, but I could hear it in that talkback group on Sunday. Like the conclusion was, we're going to get through this together by putting our resources and our love together on the table. That's how we're going to make it through.
And something that came up in my group is that our resources, and I think you were saying this too with your friends that felt immunocompromised, and something they could give was that they could call and make that connection. Another thing we were talking about was how our resources are more than just our money, or what we get paid for our labor.
Yeah.
You know, our resources are also like our emotional energy. You know, where are we spending that?
Totally. That came up in my group too. People were creatively recognizing what they have to give. Somebody talked about like using the extra time they have right now to do some research around, unemployment, applying for unemployment, or applying for the grants from the government, things like that, to help others in our community who need to do it. But, it's kind of overwhelming. There's not even enough information out there yet. It's kind of changing day to day, how to access different resources. And so giving your time, giving yourself by showing up, by making a phone call, by reaching out, all of that really makes a difference.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool opportunity that this thing is giving us, because I'm one of those people who is prone to feeling like I have to solve everything myself. And this pandemic is just so impossible. It's just so impossible to do that on every level, that like we have to rely on God and rely on each other.
Yeah, it's such a unique time because in almost every way, we're all getting stripped down of our normal processes, resources, rhythms of life, expectations. All of that is changing. And it puts us all in a vulnerable enough place that we do have to ask God, like, what next? How do we do this? How do we move through this together? And someone in my cell this week was talking about how this collective suffering is meaningful because it can help us. It can open our eyes to how people have been suffering all along. There's like a solidarity in all of our vulnerability. And I think God is going to use that to keep meeting us and inspiring us for who we're going to be as the church, and how we're going to keep responding to the grief and the loss and the urgency of this moment.
I really love the richness of the dialogue that you are talking about that came from these groups. And I want to invite the people listening into that talkback this week. If you want to get into a talkback group this Sunday, just email Luke, Luke, at circleofhope.net with your email address, and we'll get you in a group on Sunday that you can contribute to. You can see the richness of it now. You can add to it too. I'm really excited that you're listening to our podcast. It's so great to connect with you this way, especially during this time of COVID-19. I'm craving your support, though. We want more people to hear us. And the best way that you can help us with that are, well, I guess there's two good ways you can do it. First, you can share money with us. Go to circleofhope.net/sharing and make a contribution. That'll help us keep this podcast going, pay the staff that organizes it, and even pay the pastors that put it on. And if you can't do that, or in addition to doing that, you can go to wherever you listen to our podcast and give us a positive review. Positive reviews help people hear us, and listen to us and see us. And so that's one thing you can do. If you want to learn more about circleofhope.net, you can also go to our website and sign up for our mailing list. It'll keep you updated about everything that's going on in our community, and as well as give you ideas about what we are about and what we are. It helps shape our character for you too. And like we're talking about on this episode, this Sunday, the 5th of April, is Palm Sunday, and it begins Holy Week. Holy Week is a week where we await the death of Jesus, and it's a dramatic week. And the reason we enter into the drama is because the death of Jesus really does need to be experienced. The first disciples experienced it, and it changed their lives. And you can see this in the Gospels themselves. The whole Gospel slowed down as we get to Jesus' death. They're a big part of the story. And subsequently, it's a big part of our life together. We want to experience that too. It is one of those things that needs to be experienced to be fully grasped, and Holy Week is our tradition for doing that. You can go to circleofhope.net/Holy Week to learn a lot more about what we're doing. But it's a great opportunity to really experience something that can't just be known, but needs to be lived, needs to be embodied.
Alright, next we've got another new segment coming at you. It's called Very Christian, because Circle of Hope is designed to make people who are very Christian. Not just Christian or kinda Christian, though those people are all welcome. Our goal is to be serious Christians who are actually trying to do what Jesus said and do what Jesus did, which is a lot of work. This is not an easy task, so we need to mobilize a whole community to be about that in order for it to happen in ways that we can see and feel and make real in our lives. So we're going for very Christian. Y'all like it?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
Does it describe kind of what our project for Circle of Hope a little bit?
Yeah, because it gets us into the doing that you're talking about. It's not just about ideas or theology or something that's in our heads. It's in embodied.
Yeah,
life.
It's happening all in every part of our lives. This is affecting us, and one of the places that it affects us probably the most is in our mind and in our heart. Jesus was always trying to get time for solitude in the Gospels, because I think that I know Jesus was human. I'm pretty sure about that, and so our experience of all of these thoughts and all these feelings, Jesus wasn't divorced from that process of trying to hear from God and sort stuff out. So silence and solitude was crucial for him. We're in the middle of Lent, which is this 40-day time of essentially silence and solitude. We want to turn that part of our lives up in lots of ways. Make more space for prayer, make more space for emptiness so we can experience God strongly. We can very experience God as we have this kind of season of discipline to move us towards Jesus' death, through it onto his resurrection, because we need that level of intensity. And it's 40 days because Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness fasting and praying right before he got into his ministry as a traveling prophet and healer and lover of all the people. He kind of busts onto the scene after he has this experience with God in silence and solitude. So silence and solitude definitely is crucial to having an experience of God's presence. Am I right?
Yeah, I think you're right, Ben. I think that one thing that people have to realize, in my opinion, is you can't get away from silence. Try as I might, I can't always be listening to a podcast in the car, always be listening to music. It's really hard. It's almost impossible to avoid silence. And so what contemplative prayer and what solitude teaches you to do is what to do with your inevitable silence, so that you don't flee it. You actually have a use for it. I think that Christianity makes the inevitable useful and fills it with meaning. I think that's what life in Christ really looks like.
What does that look like for you specifically, Jonny? Like, that's a nice kind of idea, but we're trying to do and feel and get into it. So I'm pressing you a little bit. What's it like for you personally to practice this? How do you know that's true? How do you, Jonny Rashid, know that what you just said is true?
It's like this, Ben. Like I said, I can't always be listening to something in the car, for example, and I do that regularly. And I didn't have an idea for what to do with my stillness. And one of the reasons I can't sit still quite often is because I never answered that question. And so I started pastoring almost 10 years ago. And
Wow. Wait, when's your 10-year anniversary?
it'll be the end of August this year. And
Oh, wow.
before I felt the call, I took a personal retreat for 3 days, which is longer than I now do, but it taught me to have a regular rhythm in my life where I am in silence by myself in a place that no one can even observe. For me, that's a real growth area. What is, because I'd like my silence to be conspicuous. I want you to see me being silent so you think that I'm special and holy, But the beauty of the personal retreat, which now you know about, is that people don't experience it with me, and I don't make a big thing of it generally. And so that's a crucial discipline in my life. And for me, once it gets locked in as a discipline, it stays for a long time. I like those kind of habits, and they become a part of my life.
It's so interesting to me that you feel like silence is inevitable. And I'm sure you're right, but my experience of that is so different. I feel like in my life, I feel like I really have to fight for silence. And maybe that just says something about my psychology, but I am blessed to have people around me that I love a lot who have things to say, and I want to take care of them. And, the whole world of screens is upon us all the time. And amidst my own compulsions to do things or relate with others in order to be affirmed or accomplished, in all of that, I feel like I really have to fight to have the silence and solitude with God that I know I need so much.
Because your world is full of noise, and you have to fight to be quiet.
Yes.
I fill up my world with noise.
I try not to, because I crave that solitude with God. And so I try in the mornings when I wake up not to jump on Facebook or respond to email right away or do something for somebody else, but to have that time of quiet prayer and reading my Bible and journaling, because I know that really grounds me.
That is good. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I respond to an email. I mean, I have a lot of problems. Julie, how do you stay quiet? How do you find silence? I have little kids, and they're never silent. And so when your kids are a little older than mine, do they ever shut up?
There's definitely plenty of noise in our household and in my life, and even in my head. Rachel's talking about getting away and making space for silence. But even in that discipline, I crave it too. But even in that discipline, I often just am meeting myself and the noise in my head first before I can even get to some space to be with God. I think silence and solitude are actually good for that. They're good for kind of revealing the noise. I think one contemplative describes it as like the noisy monkeys in our head that jump around all the time, like the ideas and thoughts and worries, and so it sort of reveals that. But then it is possible, and this is, I think, what we need as spiritual, soulful beings, to be able to sift down through that and to settle into a deeper place that is not driven around by all that noise.
Yeah, and that's why it takes practice, because I think the more we practice, the more we can recognize our own monkey mind and kind of surrender to God's calming voice cutting through that. And it doesn't happen on its own. We have to practice it.
I have a spiritual director who encouraged me with this recently. I love a guy. I think Henry Nouwen is the monkey brain guy. Is that right? But I could be wrong about that. Another one of these contemplatives that I listen to is Martin Laird. He's a Villanova professor, so a local guy, and he writes these very nice books. First one is called Into the Silent Land, and then he has 2 follow-ups. Anyway, he taught me how to pray, and I can say that confidently. And I was talking to my spiritual director about this, and I was like, I don't know how to be like Martin Laird, because I want to be an expert 2 seconds into the process. And one thing that she said that helped me is that Martin Laird doesn't have any little kids, and he's committed his life to this. He's a professor. And if you keep comparing yourself to the great contemplatives as if you're supposed to achieve what they did, you might never learn to pray, you know? So figuring out how to do it in our own context with young children, for me, for example, is really helpful. And she said, I loved it. She said that kind of decolonizes what we think of in terms of contemplation. And that was really helpful for me because I condemn myself for not being a legendary contemplative in my 30s or something like that.
I'm so glad you said that, Jonny. I think that's really how I became a Christian was learning how to abide with God. I love how Jesus uses that term of abiding in the vine. I felt so frustrated about how do I do that when my kids were little and I had no quiet time. I think the opportunity is still there. Jesus is talking about something deeper, a deeper place we can live in the midst of whatever our work and our home situation and the world, the circumstances of the world are happening.
Which speaks to this moment, literally right now, in the midst of a pandemic where we're all in quarantine or lockdown. In some ways, we're being forced to be still, and yet it's hard. As I talk to people, I know that I'm not alone in the struggle to quiet your own anxiety and fear, and it brings out all of that core stuff that we're each carrying with us. And yet, as you're saying, when you were home with little ones, Rach, the opportunity is still there. God is still ready to meet us in the midst of this chaos.
So we are all kind of experiencing this in our own lives, in our own practice. Each one of us practices silence and solitude in one way or another. What do we say to the person that has never thought about praying that way? Or, Rachel, you said earlier that I crave silence and I crave that experience with God. What about the person that doesn't have a taste for that yet? And they're kind of like, maybe. What do you say to that person? How can we sign people up for this project?
Because they might not have that craving now, is what you're saying. So how do they get into it? How do they discover it?
Oh, I think maybe this might be a craving that's built into humanity, but not everyone is aware of it. So how do we help people feel it? Or how can we describe it in a way that someone might want to try it?
I have a kid that likes French fries, but she doesn't like potatoes. This is what she says to me. And I was like, you just don't know what you're talking about. They're the same thing. How could you possibly like French fries and you don't like potatoes? They're literally the same thing. But kids' tastes can help us develop a discipline to love silence because they actually need to taste food like a dozen times before they develop a taste for it. And so it is hard to organically develop an interest in silence because our world is not silence and you never get that message. They never advertise that to you. Even in a worship meeting, there won't be a moment of silence because the instrumentalist will fill every silence with some thing on his guitar, right? And so we don't even learn to do that. But submitting to followers of Jesus that have done this for a long time and actually listening, hey, you're a real great person, Teresa of Avila, and you love silence. And so, because you have demonstrated with your rich life that silence is good, even if I don't have an appetite for it now, I at least want to try it 12 times before I say it's not for me. That's what I can recommend. I'm not sure if you can find it just within yourself, but if you humble yourself to the experience of the wisest people around us, you might be inclined to develop a discipline for it, even before you have a taste.
So if you want to know God, you might have that desire, you should try silence.
Right.
You should try it 12 times or whatever the equivalent is, because it's good, and you should.
Well, yeah, not just because Teresa of Avila practiced it, but because Jesus himself, Ben, you started us there. That Jesus gave us the example in his own life Yeah.
Yeah. Well said, Julie.
Okay, we're done.
But I would.
Jesus said, do it.
Well,
I mean, that is what we're talking about with very Christian is like, yeah, we're going to actually try to do this thing. So, like, if Jesus is doing it, we want to do it. Come on, let's go. But still, I'm trying to be really hospitable to everybody. So Rachel's got more to say. I'm talking over her.
I just want to add, it's okay that if you don't crave it. I think that's okay. I think what Jesus is saying is that he wants to give us his peace. And it is peace, not as the world gives. And when we get desperate enough to know that peace, I think we will go to the source, and we will get more into silence and solitude and know that we're okay there. I think that was Jesus's point, that we don't need all the striving, all the distraction from our anxiety, all the other things we look to in relationships to kind of consume. I think Jesus was saying, they're not gonna fully satisfy you. So come to me and I will give you rest. And silence and solitude is a way to rest deeply.
And we're saying it's a crucial way. It's not just like one on the grocery shelf. It's like, if you want to be very Christian, you should try to figure this out. Mm-hmm. And it will take a process. Like Jonny's frustrated right now in his 30s that he's not a contemplative guru already and writing Martin Laird books. You know, why does he have to read a book? He should be writing a book already. I get that. And I think we're often plagued with that sense of mastery.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jonny's an especially ambitious dude.
He is. I think that maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know, like trying something and not being good at it is a difficult thing. And this is a process that one reason to set out on a quest to find God in silence, to meet God in solitude, because it's not an automatic thing. One reason to do it is that it does take time, and it is a process that requires your consistent attention, and you have to keep fighting all the things that are going to crowd it out to make the space for doing nothing. You know, and it feels like doing nothing a lot of the time. Half the time when I sit in my prayer chair, I'm just, okay, is this almost over? I'm doing my thing. I showed up.
Yes.
And, you know, I've learned that it's not, that showing up is actually part of the process. And if I can do that, like something's happening that I don't understand. For me, it feels really good because it doesn't feel active. I'm not operational, you know, mm-hmm. and I think for me personally, that's something that Jesus needs to get around, is to say, no, you're not instrumental here. You're becoming an instrument of my peace. Mm-hmm. You know, you're not the violin master, you know, this isn't Yo-Yo Ma, you're a cello. You know, you don't get to be the one with the skill and the power and the insight, which is kind of what I'm always wanting. And so to just let all of that go and just receive God's love, that's what I'm doing in silence, is just spend time with my heart and my mind and my body facing God. That's it.
Yes, and in that space, Ben, I think we're often being healed of the troubles that would keep us from that space and that peace with God. I'm thinking of a friend texted me this morning that she was trying to fight off some depression now in this quarantine. And my encouragement to her was, don't just fight it off. Look at it. Look at it with God. There's probably something there that God wants to heal, some deeper love that God wants to apply to that trouble. And I think we can get there in the silence and solitude.
Well, there's going to be a great opportunity for silence and solitude that Jonny was already telling you about, but the prayer that we're doing during Holy Week next week is going to suggest this, to make that space, even make it in your own house. So follow us at circleofhope.net/dailyprayer to get some more ideas about how to do this. One of the things that's going to be essential that we did not mention but is really helpful as you're getting started, if you're going to try silence, is a breath prayer. So learn about that there and give it a shot. Let's be very Christian.
called Spiritual Show and Tell. I don't know if you had show and tell in elementary school, but I remember show and tell. It was like the best part of the day. You could like bring in something from home that you loved, that you wanted to show all your friends. You know, a chance to share your joy. So that's the whole point of this last segment, is to share little bits of joy. What's feeding your soul right now?
What's feeding my soul is that the tree swallows are back at Newton Lake. I live across the street from a lake that was made in the 40s or 50s by a dam on this little creek, Newton Creek. But it's this big expanse of water right out my window. And my neighbor Ging, shout out to Ging, that's his name, Ging. I love this guy. He's got a four-wheeler and he drives it around.
Hi, neighbor.
He drives his four-wheeler around the property, and the property is like a half a football field. He's awesome. He's just ready. Anyway, what he also does is he hangs those gourds. Those, like, have you ever seen gourds that for the little birds to fly in? He hangs those up in the spring so that the swallows can nest there. And swallows eat a bunch of mosquitoes and bugs like that, so they're nice to have around, but they're also beautiful as they skim across the water and just crazy shapes that they're making in the air, and they're bright blue and white on the bottom, and they're in the morning and the evening they're just a little twittering beauty just all the time, and they're back. Spring is really here, and it's feeding my soul.
You know what I love about that, Ben? Jesus talks a lot about birds for some reason. And
because he loves them.
Jesus and Ben.
That's a good reason to do it. And I think paying attention to the little birds around you is a very Christian thing to do.
Consider the birds. Jesus said it. I do it.
There you go.
Because Jesus said it, actually. I decided to be a birder, as
You're very Christian.
Yeah, I'm very Christian.
Awesome.
My birding was a decision I made actually when Oliver, my now 9-year-old, when he was a baby. I decided this is what he and I are going to do together. We're gonna watch birds.
Ben's a great Christian. We were just on a call together about birds for some reason, and all I did was make fun of the blue jay, which I think is the worst animal in the forest. So we're made up of different parts, I think.
Blue jays are awesome.
They're mean.
I love them.
What's feeding my soul recently is the extra family time that this quarantine is providing. And in the midst of you're in my space again, and do I really have to do the dishes again? Kind of working it out. There are these joyful, spontaneous things happening that I think are teaching us how to love each other and appreciate each other more. But one thing that happened yesterday was that I tried out my son's balance board. He's big into skateboarding, and he wanted me to try out his creation of a skate deck on top of this like rolly thing. And I tried it, and it was really hard, and it flung me across the room. This story's funny because I didn't get hurt, but I did fly so far that I did a somersault in the air. It was kind of like a cartoon, Jeff and Zach said. I did a somersault in the air. It was like flying off a banana peel, and I landed. I got so much air that it really hurt when I came down, but I was okay, and we are still laughing about this moment. And I would be rich if we were videotaping. I'd be rich because it would be viral. I
can't believe they didn't.
Yo, monetize that viral video. Wow! Did you scream?
No, I was committed, man.
Just silent. Silently flying
flip
through the air.
Rachel even flips through the air
Do
in
that
silence.
on slow-mo.
It was amazing. It's just such a contemplative person.
La mocha.
I'm so glad you did not break anything and
Me
have to go
too.
to the hospital. Wow.
It's fortunate.
I really appreciated the, I think you could call it contemplative reflection of my friend Joel. He wrote a blog post and shared it around this week where he was reflecting on the tree out front of his house that is growing and beginning to bloom, and the bees that came to it. And in particular, he was just noting how it is God who makes things grow. And he called this a miracle. And he was looking at and naming the miracles that were associated with this tree, and how it helps him look at his whole life as full of miracles. If a miracle, who knows how you can define that, but he said if you can define a miracle basically as what God is making grow, his whole life is full of miracles when he stops to consider it. And reflecting with him on his tree actually gave me pause to reflect on the miracles of my day and my life, and it brought me joy.
I'll tell you what nourished my soul this week. And it really is figuring out how to be who we are in this time of COVID-19. We're protesters. How are we going to protest with social distance? That's the question we're asking. Guess what? We're going to drive our cars around City Hall and honk to free the prisoners so they don't die from COVID-19. I just love the ingenuity of this group. We're going to do it. We're going to honk. Julie's horn blew out. Ben was there too. We were just making a big deal.
My whole family was there.
It was great.
They hated me by the end. But say more. I don't think people know what you're talking about yet.
So prisoners are particularly victims of the spread of this virus that's killing people, because try socially distancing in jail. You can't do it. And so people are talking about other methods like freeing them to keep them alive. That's the idea behind our protest. But even though that was inspiring and we got to go out and actually do something, what was fun about it was the creativity of driving around, honking our horns, and trying to make a big deal, big noise in the middle of this crisis, in the middle of this quarantine. I love that the rocks will cry out even when the powers are telling us that we can't, and I participate in that. That's fun for me. That really does nourish my soul, that I can make a difference even in a socially distant way. And I think those creative ideas change the whole world. So it's great that we're doing it. Even if the policy never changes, that we will still be creative about how we're going to do it. That's exciting. That's inspiring. So that's how my soul is nourished.
I sure hope the policy changes, though, because
absolutely,
especially the so many people are in Philadelphia county jails that aren't even convicted of a crime. And they're just sitting ducks for whenever the virus makes its way into the overcrowded facility.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
It
is a
tragedy. That's got to change.
Yeah.
We'll post some stuff in the show notes about that, the actual policy stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
And according to what I've read so far, they don't even have adequate soap supplies in a lot of correctional facilities. So the virus is spreading 10 times faster inside than outside. So it's almost genocidal, keeping our people in prison during this time.
Well, that's our show. We're ending on that note. That's okay. There's more dialogue to be had. Will you send us your dialogue back? Talk back to us. Resist and Restore podcast at circleofhope.net. That's how you do it. We want to hear from you, And when we say we're extending the table of our dialogue, we don't just want you to listen into the conversation. We actually want you to participate in it. And if you write us, we'll probably get you on the show. So, thanks for tuning in. See you next time.